Welcome back. I'd like to now introduce Todd Feland, who is the Grand Forks City Administrator. He'll be giving us a presentation about the proposed sales tax here in Grand Forks and how that revenue might be used. I'll turn it over to Todd.
Thank you, and thank you for the Chamber for allowing us to have this informational briefing on behalf of the city measure of the sales tax this evening. Thank you. I often get asked, what is a current city sales tax? And this pie chart demonstrates the existing city sales tax. Importantly, Grand Forks was one of the leaders back in the 1980s. Through a home rule charter, the city passed a 1-cent sales tax, and in 1985 that was dedicated to the water treatment plant. After that was conducted by the water treatment plant, the sales tax then was expanded into its three current uses, and currently right now it goes to 49.5% for property tax relief, 30% for infrastructure, and currently right now that specifically relates for the most part to roads, and then the final is the 20.5% that goes to economic development. The city of Grand Forks also has a sunsetted sales tax that will sunset in 2029, and that relates to the debt service on the Alara Center. The current 1 cent that I spoke of with the three different component parts, that does not have a sunset, but in 2029, or about 13 years from now, the Alara Center debt service will be retired, and therefore that 3/4 cent sales tax will go away at that time too. I often, the other part is, what are our comparison regional cities doing in our area? And as you can see, if you look on the left-hand side of the chart, demonstrates what currently is a sales tax total in many of the regional communities in our area, from Fargo, Bismarck, and Sioux Falls and Grafton. And then on the right side of the chart, you can see, interestingly enough, of that total percentage on the left, what is dedicated towards infrastructure. And you can see with many of the cities in our region that quite a bit of their sales tax is dedicated to infrastructure. And if you can see, for example, Fargo has, of their 2.5%, 2% is dedicated to infrastructure-related activities, which brings in about $48 million. You can see that throughout all the cities in North Dakota and the upper Midwest, and you can also see the relative size of our regional trade area, Grand Forks versus communities like Fargo, Bismarck, and Sioux Falls, that we are a relatively smaller community, and that reflects in how much is brought in by the sales tax. What other cities are doing? The city of Bismarck was contemplating putting a 1 cent sales tax for road infrastructure in November. They decided against that. In the city of Bismarck, there is a split on their city commission about whether to move forward. There were some concerns with their chamber and their economic development corporation whether to move forward. So at this point in time, they decided to hold off on that ballot measure. Fargo and Cass County, with their 2.5%, they are moving forward to extend their current sales tax to 2084. The reason why they're doing that is a lot of their infrastructure is multi-generational, to include the Fargo flood diversion project. So they need to demonstrate to those that would want to finance that project that there is plenty of time and plenty of revenue over that time period to pay for that debt service. What is Grand Forks doing? And it was good to hear the candidates before. Is that what Grand Forks is trying to do is develop our own local leveraged resources in a proactive way. And in some degrees, you heard earlier tonight, is related to water and roads. And we think Grand Forks is a terrific community that's growing, and it's a dynamic and a sustainable community. But we need to come up with our own local resources so that we can leverage other resources, and we can develop our own proactive strategy. So again, these different buckets that I talked about, we have the existing sales tax at 1%, the Alara Center sales tax at 3/4 cent, and then the one that we're recommending for water and road related infrastructure. And in Grand Forks, 3/4 cent will bring in currently an estimated $7.75 million per year. This is the ballot language that people will go to the ballot on. It will be called City Measure Number 1. It'll be the last ballot measure on the ballot, just after all the state-related measures. So this will be the last measure that people have the opportunity to vote on. What is contained within that ballot measure is a 3/4 cent sales tax. It's for infrastructure, and it spells it out here. It's for water-related infrastructure, sewage-related infrastructure, stormwater, and then finally street related infrastructure. It does have a termination date of, or a sunset date of April 2067, so it is a 50-year sunset. Often get questions on why is it 50 years, that's a long time. The reason for that is many of these projects that we're currently working on are multi-generational. The water treatment plant, that is really a forefront project, will have a 30-year debt service on that particular project. And when we start that project in 2016 and 17, it'll be a 3 to 4 year project before it finally gets completed, which means we at least need 34 to 35 years of debt service, because by the time we're going to sell our 50% of the project, we're going to be 35 years into the project. The other project that we highlight is the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, and I'll show you a slide coming up, is that we're hoping for debt service on that through some state low finance, debt financing. Will be a 50-year debt financing on that. Finally, we really pushed forward with roads, and if we know anything about roads, I suspect whether it's next year or 49 years from now, we're going to need road infrastructure to maintain that. And so there's always going to be issues and demands for road infrastructure. So it's not because we want to extend it beyond what we need to, but there are some real reasons why 50 years makes a lot of sense. On the water-related projects I talked about, those really are multi-generational projects, and we want to make sure those that will enjoy those assets will pay for them well into the future. And then this is how we break down that $7.75 million. Right now we're anticipating bonding about $63 million over 30 years at 3.25% for the water treatment plant. That gets you to a bond payment of about $3.6 million. That project's currently being bid, and we think we'll have results in November. Then we can kind of finalize what that term will be. Again, I talked about the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. That's a $1 million payment over the next 50 years. So you can see that's a $30 million bonded over 50 years at 2%. And then finally, that leaves about $3.15 million for road-related infrastructure and some of those other infrastructures I talked about, storm and wastewater or sewage, but really focusing, because there's such a need for road-related infrastructure investment, that we really have pressed forward that we need to keep as much as possible as part of this sales tax initiative for road-related infrastructure. Again, here's the water treatment plant, and the city of Grand Forks has done a really terrific master plan over the last 15 years of putting in place really critical infrastructure on the drinking water side. And you can see, if you go from the Red Lake to the Red River, it's important to note that we have an intake that was built after the flood, and that draws water from the Red Lake and the Red River. That will continue to be in place. We have transmission lines that are put along the Demers Avenue corridor, and we've also built some residual ponds and other things regarding getting set up for this water treatment plant. So we've already invested about $52 million over the last 15 years to get us ready for this final piece of the puzzle, which is the water treatment plant. Important to note, I think, when the water treatment plant downtown gets taken offline, it'll be likely redeveloped as part of the downtown, and that'll be exciting. But the other important note is that transmission line that currently carries finished water from our water treatment plant to the west side of town into a clear well and pump station, and gets redistributed out by the Amtrak station. That will carry raw water to the water treatment plant, and again will get distributed. So it's a reuse of the current infrastructure, and it's quite an innovative, really long-term thinking plan. So we have a lot to be thankful for those that planned this now that we're getting to the last piece of the puzzle. Again, this shows, before I spoke, we talked about the state funding the 50-50 cost share. We should be very thankful to our local legislators and what they've done to commit that. Because essentially what that does, that allows the city to, right now we're proposing our cost share of this estimated $148 million facility will be $74 million. And so you can see where the city share is broken down into, the state funds on the top and our local funds. We've already spent about $11 million to get to the point of bidding of this particular project, and that's where you get the $63 million in bond, and that's what I talked about, the $3.6 million in debt service. And you can see the incredible impact that the state grant is providing us by making this project even more affordable to our residents and industry in Grand Forks. The Red River Valley Water Supply, which is another incredible multi-generation project, and as we know in Grand Forks, our river systems are prone to flooding and they're prone to drought. And in this case, this is the drought mitigation project, and it would be a supplemental water supply to Grand Forks in the time of drought. And you can see the Red River Valley with Grand Forks and Fargo in the southern and the northern valley. In the event of a 1930s era drought, Grand Forks, Fargo, and the Red River Valley would be in significant trouble from a water supply perspective. So this project is to bring Missouri River water into the Red River Valley watershed through the Cheyenne River system and into the Red River, where we would have a supplemental water supply that would come in. So we'd still have our water treatment plant and all the things that we have here, but in a time of drought it's hard to imagine the 1930s, but if a 1930s era drought hit the Red River Valley, they've estimated at least a $2 billion per year economic impact in the Red River Valley, and would be impacted throughout the state. And we can just about imagine the human toll that would take in our region. This is what we've asked for as part of the project, and I did say we think our cost share is $30 million. This is another state local funding project. It's estimated to be about a $900 million to a $1 billion project. And what currently right now, we have assumed that the local entities will share in about 200 million of that. And so our 200 million of that share translates into 30 million. And we're looking at it, when people ask about this 50 years, we're looking out to what Grand Forks will look like in 2075. So we've looked at what our industry will look like, what population will we have in Grand Forks, what's our per capita per day water use will be, what will conservation look like at that point in time. And so what we projected is that we will need, in a time of drought, about 16.75 million gallons per day. And what we try to look at, what would a winter day look like with lower per capita day per use with drought mitigation. Currently our average day in Grand Forks in the winter is about 8 million gallons per day. So we're essentially saying on a drought day without water in our river systems, we're going to have probably be double what we're going to use currently in 50 years from now. Again, these are some projects that we talked about trying to have a local strategy, and this is a regional strategy, and I think communities like Grand Forks that are going to be really successful over the next 50 years are going to be those that drive their own vision locally and come up with an action plan. The other thing we're going to do is act regionally, and this is a Grand Forks, East Grand Forks interconnect project where it was more affordable for East Grand Forks to interconnect with Grand Forks. It was also a benefit to Grand Forks because then we got to use some of our assets further and receive some revenue. So that's a win-win between Grand Forks and East Grand Forks. Another net benefit, if Grand Forks in the future needs to do something at the wastewater treatment plant, this sales tax is in place. That would help offset some of the rate impacts in East Grand Forks too, because they're part of our wastewater system. So that's one of the net benefits. We haven't focused a lot on wastewater projects just because I'll show you later that the rates that we're looking at are pretty moderate. We're going to have some debt service come off of this enterprise fund, so we can push most of the money that's remaining into our road infrastructure, and we won't need that. But these are some of the big projects, and as you can see, most projects when you work on facilities, they seem to be either between $5 and $20 million. So it's always a significant investments. Back to roads, and I think what I've heard from our council and our mayor and those that are out and about is we need to really be more proactive and have better streets throughout Grand Forks. So this is a 3-tiered process. So when I talked about we had about $3.15 million per year for road infrastructure, we think it's a 3-tier process where we can invest the money. Number one, we need to maintain our current street system in a more proactive way. And so what we've said here is what we call some of the minor maintenance projects, routine maintenance, that we need to set aside about $1.3 million to do those projects. And I always highlight those projects are, for instance, this summer when people noticed that we finally did Belmont Road and all the positivity we got, it got in pretty bad shape. So what we say on projects like that, that's what we need to do on projects like that are usually 50-50 cost share with neighborhood residents through special assessments, but the city is also paying 50% of those projects. So we highlight those are the projects. And what our hope is, and if you see two maps, these are what we call routine maintenance projects on 2015. These are all what we call concrete panel replacement projects throughout the city. And in 2016, we focused our energy on mill and overlay projects throughout the city, and I highlighted the Belmont Road. Our goal is, as part of this sales tax and what we're currently doing, that there's going to be more color on these maps in the future, and because we're going to be doing more routine maintenance projects and making citizens throughout the city of Grand Forks pleased because we have better roads to drive on. The second area of roads are these roads that we leverage federal and state funds, and generally these projects are on the edge of the city. They're expanding major thoroughfares throughout the whole city, and generally these are roads projects where the city has to have a 20% match, and usually the federal and state government has an 80% match. The challenge we have in our system right now is that we're struggling to even come up with our 20% match with some of these needed infrastructure projects. And you can see the city is growing south, and you can see we're in the green areas where we want to start expanding our major thoroughfares. We're growing west on the other side of interstate, and we're growing west in two areas, on the south and to the north. And you can see that's what we need to do over the next 6 years. I mentioned to you earlier that about 20.5% comes from of our existing sales tax goes to economic development. What we've done is, if you can see in that first bullet, is we're planning on the next 6 years to transfer about $4.3 million from those resources to do some major trunk line infrastructure projects to assist us in moving forward. But even with that, you can see that we're going to have significant challenges over the next 6 years. So all these projects that seem pretty reasonable to expand the road infrastructure system, we're going to be in a deficit of $16 million. So that's going to mean these projects that we have highlighted that need to get done are not going to get done. We're not going to have the money to leverage those projects. Certainly citizens are not going to stand in major infrastructure projects. They're not going to stand for increasing property taxes. They're not going to stand for special assessments. And so that's really at the crossroads that we are. We have to find a way to have an alternative funding source so we can continue to grow the city. And then this just continues to show the expansion of the community over the 10-year outlook. The other thing, and these projects get a lot of highlights in the newspaper and other media, is these large regional projects. And I'll start on the one on the north end, is the Demers Avenue, 42nd Street underpass. That's about a $40 million project. That's one of our regional priority projects. And then you can see to the south, we can see the expansion of 32nd Avenue South and the 47th Avenue South interchange. And both the 32nd Avenue South expansion is a over $40 million project, all tied together. And then the 47th Avenue South interchange is another $40 million project. Now these projects are, again, when we talk about the sales tax, number one, we need to be really competitive, and these projects are probably 60% leverage funding to 40% local funding. The other thing is these are likely debt service projects. So in 10 years from now, if Grand Forks needs to be able to match an interchange or expanding 32nd, we're probably going to have to debt service that, and we'd like to debt service as long as possible, like 30 years. So again, that relates back into that 50-year time horizon that what we see. The other thing we're trying to do is that we really needed a 47th Avenue interchange, because we really can't expand 32nd Avenue South until we have another southerly outlet. You can about imagine if we try to expand 32nd Avenue South and shut down that traffic without an outlet. And it was bad enough on Columbia Road this summer and fall, but that's going to be a no-go. So we really need a southerly outlet before we can start expanding our major corridor, because we want to make sure we maintain our commercial corridor down there. We've looked at rate increases, and so over time from 14 to 16, we've tried to start to dial down some of our rate impacts. We've had some significant projects, and we're really trying to get our utility rate fees so that they're more of a cost of living increase, and you can see where that line is trending over time. Now, these are our recommended, the City of Grand Forks is a 6-year budget forecast based on projects that are coming. And this important to note is that with the sales tax, you can see where even with the Red River Valley Water Supply Project and the Grand Forks Water Treatment Plant, you can see our rate impacts will be 2 to 3%. We'll still have to use water rates to pay for some of that, but that sales tax is really going to help offset. When you look at wastewater and stormwater, just due to how things are cash flowing from a debt service perspective, we can probably get away without significant sales tax in those two particular funds and still have moderate impacts of 2 to 4% over the next 6 years. People ask, what will happen if we don't get a sales tax approved? And you can see those 2 to 3% become 9 and 10% over time, over the next 6-year planning horizon. And so that $4.6 million in debt service is going to have to be applied to utility rates in the drinking water side. That over that time period will translate to $14 per month for what we're calling an average user in Grand Forks, which is about 6,000 gallons per month. And that translates to $168 annually. I know there's concerns about the regressivity of sales tax. We've taken a look at that, and certainly utility rates have an regressive way too, because people from all social economic factors, 1,000 gallons is 1,000 gallons. And so it's debatable what is more regressive, but just because we draw from the sales tax from outside our region for those that use our water, use our streets, we think this is a way to offset some of the rate impacts for our residents within the city of Grand Forks, and we think it helps low and moderate income people, and we think it helps our industry that are heavy water users from the value-added agricultural industry. I think the other piece, when you get asked on the regressivity of this tax, remember that 3.15 that's going for road infrastructure. Think of how much that's going to leverage both locally and at the state and federal level to bring other road projects in here. So there's two parts that we're really emphasizing, the water and the roads, and it's important for us to our local strategy. Now here's our rate impact. So we look at what 2022 looks like, and what we did is we took our regional comparisons. We did inflate all our regional benchmark communities 1% from where they are today, but you can see with the sales tax, we'd be at that $36 and change per month, kind of in the middle of the pack. If without it, we'll be in the upper quartile, down in that $50 mark in the upper quartile. So what we're trying to do is tell citizens, let's have moderate rate impacts, let's stay in the middle of the pack, and let's help all the citizens of Grand Forks and our commercial and industry. So with that, I'd answer any questions.
What could be left to say?
Well, seeing that there are no questions, we certainly thank you for your presentation. Infrastructure is, it's not flashy, but it is one of the best investments that we can make in our community going forward, and one of the best things we can leave to future generations here in Grand Forks. I appreciate the thoroughness that you provided, the information about what we have to vote on here in a couple of weeks. So in conclusion tonight, we thank you for this presentation. This wraps up our Governmental Affairs Committee open forum. I'd like to thank everybody, including the candidates that were here before us, and certainly City Administrator Todd Feland for being here tonight. We want to remind everybody that Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th, so please be sure to get out and vote. This will be rebroadcast on Saturdays and Sundays at noon and 7 p.m. for the next 2 weeks prior to the election. Thank you very much.